Thank you very much. So it's really nice that you keep your time on. And then I will allow Anne Algren to start with a question, please. Are you with us?
I am with you. Should I stick to one question or multiple questions?
You can ask any question you want.
Okay. First of all, Thomas, a very nice thesis and a very nice presentation. So thank you. I'm going to see if I can squeeze in a few questions. So my first one about the very first part of your work, what is your time step control? I realize that you didn't address that explicitly.
It is an explicit time step CFL condition.
Okay, so it is still the compressible time step?
Yes, it is. So
okay, so you've addressed two of the three limitations with compressible.
Yes.
The correctness and the hydrostatic, but you're still running at the smaller time step? Is that correct?
Yes. We could use an implicit, so get rid of the acoustic CFL condition by impliciting the numerical scheme, here replacing in the fluxes and by the intermediate time, and this would get rid of the speed of sound in the CFL condition.
Okay. So my second question is a little bit open-ended. I'm going to ask it. So when we talk about incompressible models as opposed to fully compressible, we have a mathematical interpretation and a numerical consequence, and we often say physically, people sometimes say that we've gotten rid of the acoustic waves, or that sometimes people say, well, it's like setting the speed, they travel infinitely fast, and so they equilibrate instantly. I'm wondering if you have an analogous physical description of what happens when you add this relaxation, the pressure relaxation. Do you have a way of thinking about what that means physically?
One interpretation is that so the speed of sound that we are talking here is A, I guess, in the relaxation framework. Is that correct?
So you said could you say that again?
So you are referring to A, the parameter A in the numerical scheme, that is the acoustic impedance from the relaxation numerical scheme.
So it's a general question of, so just an analogous to saying we, think of it as the speed of sound going to infinity. Is there a physical, and the answer may be there isn't a good physical one, but I'm just wondering if you have just for the whole process of what you're doing, is there a physical interpretation of what you're doing numerically?
Using the implicit numerical scheme, or related to the gravitational relaxation?
I'm thinking of with the gravitational relaxation.
Ah, okay. There is no real interpretation from our scheme. This was related more about the consistency of the thermodynamics in the acoustic step, as we use an operator splitting.
Okay.
And the fact that we also wanted a conservative numerical scheme, the splitting led to inconsistencies. So there is no real interpretation of the splitting and the relaxation of the gravitational energy.
Okay. I was curious about that. And then one last question, which is a technical detail I'm just curious about. So when you work with COCOS, my understanding is that you use, for the load balancing and such, that happens, the domain decomposition that's guided by load balancing, that happens at a higher level than COCOS itself. And then COCOS is mostly for the looping over the data, for example, on a single patch. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Do you know, and my understanding is that you can use the same, you write the code in the COCOS format, and then the same code can run on CPU or GPU?
Exactly.
So just a question, do you know how they handle, if you want to do MPI plus OpenMP, different codes have different ways of handling the OpenMP. Do you know? Have you used that in Cocos?
So internally, Cocos is using OpenMP.
When it's on a multi-core machine, it uses OpenMP.
Yes, yes, it is. So it is.
And then
it is using
okay, go ahead.
the OpenMP if
Okay.
you want to run on the cores of the CPU, and CUDA if you want to use GPUs, for example.
Okay, and do you control? I guess.
Compile time.
I'm sorry. Say it again.
You can choose at compile time the architectures and the programming models that you want to use.
Okay. Thank you very much. That concludes my part.
Thank you very much. And now I give the right to ask question to Philippe et Louis, please. Are you?
Hello. So,
yes. Thank you.
So I thank you for your very nice, very clear presentation as Anne. And I also enjoy reading your thesis, which is a nice mix of physics, numerical analysis, and high-performance computing. And I will ask a few questions. So my first question is about the splitting error, because in your numerical method, the first part of your, I will refer to a slide number in order to. Sorry, so it's for the where you write the splitting. So if I have well understood, there is in your splitting scheme, you didn't write the viscous terms. I am right?
Yeah, I'm correct.
On slide 12.
Yeah.
Yes. So you have 3 steps.
Yes.
So have you studied the splitting error? Because you have you chain time steps, so you have a numerical error due to splitting. So have you an idea of what happens with this error?
I don't. We would do if, well, it was sufficient for us to use the Lemma correction to lower the numerical diffusion. We know that the transport, so the Alpine numerical scheme is a bit diffused, and we will need to go to a higher order to improve this. But as such, the truncation error related to the splitting, no, I don't have. We didn't study this error.
Okay. Because when you have a splitting with 2 steps, normally it remains second order because you chain in a symmetric way. But when you have 3 steps, you lose second order, I think. But anyway.
In this context, it may not be impossible, but it is difficult to alternate the steps because we have to follow some specific order. So the acoustic first and the transport as second step, in order to, as I mentioned in the next slide, in order to be fully conservative.
Okay.
So we have to respect.
Okay, so the order is imposed by the conservation requirement. Okay, yes. And then I have another question. It's rather on slide 18, and I think it's related to the question that Anne just asked. It's about what is the meaning of the acoustic steps here, because you would like to get rid of acoustics here. So. So the numerical results you show on slide 18, they are done with an explicit scheme. I am right?
Yes, exactly.
And so the acoustic steps is meaningless here. So have you seen some, when you plot the result, you plot the result at all the time step, or you choose, do you have some comments about this, how to get rid of the acoustics? Because acoustics here is more problems than a necessity.
In the perspectives of this work, because so we have an implementation of the implicitation of the acoustic subsystem, but it is still not ready to be used with gravity, and to be efficient using implicit schemes, we noticed that we need to be at least at a 10 to minus 3. The Mach number needs to be at 10 to minus 3. And also to have a good preconditioner in order to be efficient and to decrease the number of time steps. So there are many parameters to study in order to be performant on such simulations. So even at this resolution.
And for example, when you start your computations, the initial data, do you have some treatment on the initial data in order to remove, for instance, data that are not physical? This is called well-prepared data. You have this kind of preparation or not?
No, we don't do anything special about the acoustic preparation of the data.
Okay. And then, okay, so let's go to the bubble collapse now. So it's on the slide 26.
Yes. So the three-dimensional case.
So here, do you use? So you have you use your scheme with the Lomac correction here? I don't remember.
Yes, we try to enable it only inside the liquid droplets, far from the interface, as we notice some spurious oscillations at the interface.
Okay, so you have an automatic adjustment of this theta parameter?
Yes, we can use the volume fraction to kind of detect the interface. And
okay, so you decided to activate it at the interface. Okay.
Far from the interface.
Far from the interface. Sorry. Okay, thank you. And then I have two more questions, and then it will be finished. So the next is about Cocos. So Cocos is for accessing the GPU or the OpenMP part of the computations, and MPI is completely separated from Cocos, if I have well understood.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we need to use
then,
for running on supercomputers.
Okay. And the GPU implementation, so you describe the algorithm in a very abstract way, and then the GPU code is CUDA code is automatically produced. I'm right?
Yes, exactly. The CUDA kernel is written in a generic way inside the source of Cocos, and the function that the function call operator that you write is called inside a CUDA kernel.
Okay. And for instance, on slide 32, and this is my last question. Can you go on slide 32?
Yes.
It's okay? Okay. Yes, the question is that if you want to be efficient on GPU and CUDA, it's very important to access the stencil in a very careful way in order to have coalescent memory access. So do you have to express this, or is it automatic?
No, you have to take care of it, but this execution policy, so the team vector range is accessing the data in a contiguous fashion. So if JX, for example, is assigned to a thread inside the warp, the CUDA warp, then JX plus 1, the next index, is for the next thread in the warp.
Okay. But this can be inefficient on CPU. So do you use the same writing for the CPU and the GPU? Or?
Yes. So contrary to the GPU case, in the CPU case, this loop is divided into chunks. And
okay.
each chunk is given to one CPU thread, and as we have a contiguous set of indices to treat for one thread, we can use the vectorization to accelerate the computation.
Okay. So there is a different treatment between CPU and GPU.
This is internal.
And then finally, I have a last question on slide Finally, sorry, I have another question in slide 34. So I just no, maybe just a comment. So what I can comment is that you have done a weak scaling. So you presented the result for the weak scaling for the GPU and strong scaling for CPU core. So why don't you use a weak scaling on CPU core and strong scaling on GPU? It's just this question.
So for the weak scaling test, I didn't do it. So Simon Daly did it for the grand challenge simulation on the Janset machine. In the case of the CPU, it was it was only required to do a strong scaling test in order to get the grand challenge, and we didn't take time to do the weak scaling test.
And for the GPU, did you try to do a strong scaling test?
No, I didn't do it. No.
Okay, many thanks again.
Thank you very much. So now, Isabelle Baraf, you can ask your question, please.
Okay. Bonjour Thomas. Thanks for, I would say, nice presentation and very concise. That was challenging given the topic. So I have several questions. The first one concerns the test you did for the 2D strongly stratified Rayleigh-Bénard convection. So you showed a range of Mach numbers.
Yes.
I would like to know how low is your low Mach in the blue regions? How low is that?
It can even go to 0 because the velocity reaches almost 0 at the center of the vortex. So yes, it can be exactly 0 depending on the resolution.
Okay, because well, in some cases, in stellar convection, for example, in convective cores, typical Mach number can be as low as 10 to minus 5, 10 to minus 6, and I would say many hydrocodes are struggling with this type of very low Mach convection. So I'd be curious to know how far have you pushed your Mach number in some of the experiments you've been doing, and do you think that you could reach for typical convection Mach number as low as 10 to minus 6 or even 10 to minus 7?
I performed 2D test with the Gréchaux vortex because it is parameterized with the Mach number and using the implicit scheme. So depending if we enable or not the low Mach correction, we were having different results. But we could reach down to 10 to minus 5 and with difficulty 10 to minus 6 in a 2D setup, so a 2D simulation. So we, of course, as in the case when the low Mach correction is disabled, the vortex is destroyed, but the solver does not have difficulty and is only performing a few iterations to find the solution. So in the implicit case, we are using only the material CFL condition. And if we enable the low Mach correction, we have much more difficulty to converge in the matrix, the implicit case. The linear systems is much more difficult to solve for the solver. We noticed that I assume that the difficulty comes from the pressure that was really high, and we were trying to capture a perturbation of this high pressure that is at Mach square. So if we write like in the low Mach models, if we try to derive the low Mach models, we have the thermodynamics pressure and the perturbation that is at the order of Mach square. And so we try to get the full solution, so the thermodynamics pressure and the correction at Mach square. And I assume that this is the difficulty, using a fully compressible system to solve a really low Mach situation.
Okay. Now this is about the radiative convection instability, and more generally about a system where you have thermal diffusion. So, for example, in stars, in the atmospheres, thermal diffusion, yeah, exactly. Thermal diffusion will be important, and it can be so important that it will also introduce stiffness in your system, like the sound waves, which means that in principle, you should do the same job as you're doing for the acoustic waves, the same treatment, the same low Mach treatment, and you should do that as well with the thermal diffusion terms. So is this something that you have implemented, or because you may have problems for the type of applications you want to do for this radiative convective instability?
It is not done in the main code ARC, but we have some prototype code that are implementing using Tridinos, an implicit scheme for diffusion equations. So there wouldn't be much difficulty to do that in the main code. There are well-known preconditioners for such parabolic systems equations. So this shouldn't be a problem to solve this equation implicitly. I don't see any main difficulty.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know also, when you start, for example, this type of simulation, the one you are showing, how do you deal with the transient phase where you probably have a lot of strong acoustic waves propagating because of your initial model, etc. What do you do there to try to get rid as fast as possible with this transient phase?
The transient phase was done at a lower resolution, and we increased incrementally the resolution in order to reach the almost 5,000 squared cubed. Sorry.
How do you do that? I mean, how do you increase? How do you do your extrapolation of by increasing the resolution?
So we initially start the simulation at a lower resolution. We stop it and take this solution and interpolate it on a finer grid, and do that for multiple times in order to reach the final desired resolution.
And you don't introduce more noise by this interpolation, as the multiple interpolation steps? Okay, means you do a good job. Because we try to do that, but it's maybe tricky.
Yeah, for that I don't know. I didn't run this simulation. I don't know. Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah. And I have a last question about your droplets, and above all about your negative pressure.
Yes.
Which is of course very, very intriguing. And could you elaborate on that, and what could be the impact of this finding of this negative pressure?
So in this simulation, there is no negative pressure because of the usage of the homogeneous equilibrium model, and in particular the relaxation step, the final step. But if we remove this final step and only use a 5 equations model, indeed, we run into negative pressures when the shock waves is reflecting at the back of the droplets. It represents a stretching of the liquid, and so that's why we then went to equilibrium models in order to form the steam in consequence of the stretching of the liquid. So in the literature, we can find simulations and interpretations of physical interpretation of the negative pressures, but the question was not so clear in this context, in the context of the liquid droplet impact. So we have two results with these simulations with negative pressures. So they go quite low, and this results in which we try to form steam using the relaxation step.
Okay, thank you. I'm done.
Thank you very much. Now, Carlos Perez, it's your turn. Are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Ah, good.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, Thomas. I agree with my colleagues. You did a good presentation, and it is a nice work of numerical analysis with a lot of different numerical techniques, state-of-the-art numerical techniques, and nice applications. And so I think that is, in general, a very good work of numerical analysis and scientific computing. So congratulations to you and your advisors. So yes, I have a few questions and comments, although some of them have been already answered by you. And for instance, in chapter 1, in the report, there are two different ways of discretizing the energy equation.
Yes.
You mentioned a conservative one and a non-conservative one, and you have implemented one of them in which the potential is relaxed and the equation for the energy is, let's say, conservative. And but it is not clear for me what is the advantage if there is one. Have you implemented both of them and compared? And is there any clear advantage in the one you chosen?
If we go back to the derivation of this numerical scheme, we were running convection instability simulations, and we ran onto simulations exhibiting shear flows at the end of the simulation. So we assumed that this could be related to the non-conservative form of the numerical scheme. So we started with non-conservative discretization. We tried the conservative updates, and this was not yet enough. We still were developing shear flows at the end of the simulation of the convection. So one advantage is that we are able to precisely monitor the energy in the simulation box, but not more than that in the case of energy conservation.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of non-conservative energy, this has a very close form from the original acoustic splitting, acoustic transport splitting that was published by Mathieu Girardin, and this could be maybe easier to derive an entropy to justify the entropy for the numerical scheme.
Mm-hmm. Okay. In chapter 2, I think that in general, it is a good idea to, once you have introduced a new numerical method for a system, to show first easier test cases, probably academic test cases, probably 1D cases in which you can see better the properties of the method and to compare with more classical approaches. Because there is a number of interesting things that you have pointed in red in your presentation. For instance, if you don't restrict your time steps, you can find instabilities in the presence of vacuum. And the anti-diffusive numerical method that you use can lead to numerical artifacts. It would be nice to see this in easier examples, because you go directly to this droplet complex simulation in which, at least for a non-specialist in this subject, it's difficult to tell between physical oscillations and numerical oscillations, etc. So I think, in general, I think that it is a good idea to start by applying your method to easier test problems and to detect where are these problems you mentioned, illustrate perhaps these effects you mentioned. And this is my advice. If you have not already sent your paper to publish, this would be my advice, to not only to go directly to complex application, but to also to show how is the behavior of the method in simpler cases.
For the anti-diffusive solver, it is a known problem that for some types of movement, it triggers some artifacts. And in the case, as we do not use a splitting approach, a directional splitting approach for the anti-diffusive solvers, we have different artifacts. So in the case of the transport of a square, for example, the advection of a square, we develop along the diagonal, we develop some artifacts at the corner of the square. That will converge if we increase the resolution. But yeah, at a fixed resolution, we can notice some artifacts.
Okay, so yes, but it is good to show these things.
Okay.
And now going back to your report, in chapter 3, you present the combination between the spectral spectral volume method and the first order numerical method. Well, in the report, you briefly discussed the advantages of this approach compared, for instance, to discontinuous Galerkin. But I guess that the main drawback is, in general, this discontinuous Galerkin is easily adapted to unstructured meshes, and I guess that this approach is hard to adapt. It isn't?
It depends. It was first derived on, one published on the case of unstructured meshes. So it is possible. But in the original method, then they need to use a lot of quadrature rules, and we cannot do the trick that we are using here in the case of the unstructured meshes. And so I think this is one reason it was not that many used in applications. But the numerical scheme exists in this case. We need to use more complex geometries to represent the control volumes, that in the case of structured mesh.
Okay. I would have expected to find, because you show several plots of error against number of cells, in order to see that in the smooth cases you recover the expected order. But I would have expected to find as well plots of CPU against error, to see how is the efficiency of your methods, in order to see, for instance, if the efficiency increases with the order or not, which is not trivial, especially if you have discontinuities. Have you checked that? Is the efficiency growing with the order or not necessarily?
It's not linear. If I remember well, the third order method is more efficient than the fourth order in this case.
Sorry?
The third order is more efficient in this case than the fourth order.
Uh-huh.
But we have given some values for the efficiency in the isentropy vortex test case. For only so usually the error is usually computed using smooth test cases. So when we do not need a priori or a posteriori limitation. And it has also been shown for similar numerical schemes, then higher the methods are more efficient than doing first or second order numerical schemes.
Yes, but it's interesting to see what happens when you have discontinuities and then mood acts and there are marked cells. And I think it's interesting to see how the efficiency behaves in those cases.
Okay, it could be done on some test cases like a transport case or I guess shock Riemann problem, as we would need the exact solution to be able to compute the error. Yes.
Or reference solutions. Okay. I think that. Yes, that's all from my part. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So now I will ask some question as a non-specialist of compressible hydrodynamics. But I was really impressed by the different skills that you have, meaning that there are very different subjects for each chapters, and so that was I was very impressing on all the things, because it goes from the physics till really the hardware and the Cocos library and all those things. So really, I give you my congratulations. But I have some question that related to the plot that you shown us. So for example, and the slide, I think in the 16, for which you showed the Rayleigh-Bénard instability simulations in a compressible with a compressible fluid. So usually in a Rayleigh-Bénard, so you have two cells. That's right. There's two cells which are counter-rotating, but why the aspect ratio of the cells is different from the one when you use incompressible, I mean Boussinesque classical model. Usually the aspect ratio is much more, you put a square, I mean the rows are really have an aspect ratio which fill up all the gap between the two plates, but here it seems as if the center of the rows are more below.
It is due to the stratification, because it is highly stratified, and as we are reaching a stationary state by conservation of mass, as it has more matter here, the momentum is higher here, and we need this lowers down the center of the convective cell.
I see. And so it is in this case. So you perform one simulations, or is it only an example of one of the simulation you had?
Yes, it is. It is only one example. So if we go to much lower stratification, we go the center of the convective cell goes back to the middle of the box.
And so here you are above the critical Rayleigh number corresponding to this configuration in this case. You pick up the Rayleigh number as being above the critical one,
yes,
which will depend on the stratification you choose.
Yes.
Yes, and it is a steady state solution.
Yeah, for this case, yes.
We can see.
Okay.
And in your, I think you've shown that in your slide. Yes, you've shown, for example, the kinetic energy spectrum. I guess you pick up at the exactly that on the. So In this case, it is for the 3D case, right?
Yes.
Okay, and so you plot some slope there, and then it seems that the slope you're looking at is a minus 5/3
Yes.
slope.
It is a reference from the turbulent spectrum, Kolmogorov spectrum.
Yeah, but is it so? I don't see any slope here. So where I don't see the slope of minus 5/3 in your spectra over here. Where am I supposed to look at in order to be convinced that you have this slope? I mean, is it in the region for which you have high k wave numbers or low k wave numbers? Because it seems that you have a lot of different slope here.
It was for a comparison of this region, but it is a reference, so we may not expect to find exactly this value for the.
Yeah, especially because you don't have a lot of decades. I mean, you get only 2 decades in wave numbers, and my question was. Why do you have a difference between the old regime, the two curves? Can you explain me why the two spectra are different when you use theta is equal to Mach or?
So this decreases the numerical diffusion. As the small scales are at a lower velocity, this gives more energies to these scales.
So that is, in fact, what you show here is impact of the model on the same, because you use exactly the same parameters for this 3D Rayleigh-Bénard instability in compressible fluids. Compressible fluids, but you just show here that you get a direct impact of the model you have on the energy spectra.
It's no, the model is fixed. It's more about the effect of the numerical scheme. So if the Loma correction, so the correction on the pressure flux is used, we observe the blue curve. But in the two cases, we are using the same model. So at convergence, we should end up with the same curves.
What do you mean at convergence?
If we had as much as resource as we want, if we increase the number of cells in the box, we should end up with the same power spectrums for the two cases. But to finite grid, we have some numerical diffusion from the numerical scheme, and enabling the Loma correction allows us to get rid of some numerical diffusion.
Right. But you don't get yet the minus 5/3 slope.
Not yet. No.
Not yet. Okay, I see. I didn't know where I was supposed to find it. I thought that it was more in the slope or in the right part of the spectrum. It is not the case. All right, and then I was wondering, when you use, for example, your penalty coefficient, the lambda 1/λ, when you go with lambda goes to 0, right? So did you test different values of this lambda? Meaning, is there any way of finding this lambda? How small you should get it?
Do you mean the context? We use lambda for the two applications, so astrophysics and two-phase flow. So do you mean
the one where you have a 1/λ case, or anyway in the other case you do the way around. You take lambda being very large. But my question is, how do you guess?
This?
Yes. Yeah. Which when you choose lambda goes to 0, what does it mean exactly? Do you make different tests with lambda 10 to the -2 and then 10 to the -3, or what?
In this context, no, we really want to get to lambda to 0 because we want an approximation of this simple equation. So we really want that psi tends to 5, and the only case that is in the only case possible is if lambda tends to 0. In the case of the two-phase application, we could use different lambdas and, well, two different lambdas and with finite values. That would lead to different models. And so we would not end up with the homogeneous equilibrium model in the end. But it could be a possibility. But we would need some value, and so that raises different questions. So what value to use?
But when you said that you do, sorry for that, but when you do lambda is equal to 0, right? That means that, of course, you impose that psi is equal to 5, but therefore you don't need any psi.
Okay. This is a numerical technique in order to derive the numerical scheme in the and this is related to the splitting approach and also the conservation of the mechanical energy. See, if we don't do so, at first we didn't try this approach, but this led to inconsistencies in the thermodynamics. So if we write the equation of pressure, we have extra terms related to the gravity. So we needed to introduce this relaxation to recover the consistency in thermodynamics. But this is really related to the derivation, this kind of operator splitting.
Yeah, I understand well, but for me it's just like a penalization, you know, of the conservation law that you want to impose, right? But usually you need to pick up a value for this lambda, right?
In this case, we know the value that we want. We want lambda tending to 0 in order to be consistent with the equation on the stationary equation on phi.
Okay. Okay, and then I was, can you go back to your bubble? So yes, one of, if you want to make it more clear, the one at the next slide, yeah. So one advice would be to choose, a background which is white, because in your manuscript you use blue. So it's blue against blue, so it's not very clear. And for me, I didn't know where was the wall. So for the left picture, so the wall is
the reverse from the
reverse from that. Okay. So on the right part, the wall is on the right, and on the left part, the wall is on the left. Okay. Okay. Nice for that. And then yes, I was also on the right part. You use exactly the same color bar for two different representation, right? One for which is from red to blue for the density, it seems.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And the other one, which is exact, is it the same color bar?
Color bar is used for the density that is represented here, and we only have this value that is used for this color bar, and it is located at the cavitation zone.
I didn't get it. Say it again.
So the cavitation zone here
is
using this color bar, and the rest is using this color bar.
And so what the cavitation, when you said the cavitation zone?
So it's the different variable. It's It's a volume fraction at the bottom and the density. So the mixture density.
Right. But you could choose some different color bars, right?
Yes.
No? Because I was wondering when you were talking about white, I didn't see any white in this picture, because I've seen kind of, you know, it looks like an arc at just in the middle here. I guess it is your cavitation zone, right?
But the only values that are used are mainly here, and so it was enough to see the cavitation zone. So we do not use the whole range of the volume fraction, because it goes even to 0, and here we stop at 0.9.
So you use a threshold, but I guess just use some other color bars, because I couldn't find any white. I was wondering what we was seeing. And then do you have any movies on that, or the movies are too difficult to get?
We don't have any movie for the higher resolution, but I had some movies for lower resolution and three-dimensional impacts. Yes.
Yes, because that would be nice, for example, for the because you did it in 2D, right? The cavitation things.
Yes.
But I think it is one of the slide before. Yes, just a slide before. So what do you show exactly with this kind of black lines correspond to which quantity exactly?
It's
I mean, in the numerics.
Schlieren image.
Sorry. With Schlieren, yes, but in the case of the numerics, what do you choose?
So it's in this case it's the density. So we show the norm of the gradients of density.
So when
this shows the sharp gradients for one variable, which is here the density. So we have a large ratio of density when we have black lines.
Yes, and there, in this case, which is different in the numerics with respect to the experiment, is that the cavitation part is I mean, the shape of the cavitation is totally different, right?
Yes.
Because in this case, you said that it was this kind of mushroom shape, right?
Yes.
And what happens after that? Does the mushroom just shrink and then do something else?
It shrinks, but it takes time. And so this large zone is shrinking over time slowly, and then when it gets to one point, we have a high pressure peak that develops. Depending on the velocity of the droplets, it may be important for the pressure at the wall. If it is slow enough, the pressure peak develops, and when it reaches the wall, it's lower than the initial pressure.
It's just like a focusing way.
Yes, but it does not seem to be exactly representing this situation. The cavitation zone takes much longer, and that may be related to your previous question with the lambda and time scales. So we do instantaneous relaxation, and that may explain that the cavitation zone takes time to shrink.
Yeah, because it's just like 1/time, right? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Yes, and so when you say on your slide 40 that there was the correct orders, yes. So I didn't look at the slope, but here, what is the slope that you're supposed to have? It's 1, 2, 3, 4.
So we have the expected order here written.
Okay.
And we recover a bit higher order here, so a bit greater than 2, 3, 2, and a bit less than 1.
Okay, so it was supposed to be 1, 2, 3, 4?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. I remember what it was supposed to be. Yeah. And then I have a question about this kind of miracle from Cocos. Yeah. So now I am using a code which is working on CPU, using Jean Z, for example, now, but before Ada and before Decret and whatever. And then it seemed that what will be the fate of CPU computers? I mean, no more CPU, big CPU computers, and then we all need to go to GPU and.
No, GPUs are only accelerators, so you still need a CPU to run on GPUs anyway. Then future supercomputer will still have only if you take, for example, the Fugaku machine, Fugaku, in Japan, it's still based on ARM architecture, so CPUs. And it is the first rank of supercomputers. And they are still planned for ARM architectures for supercomputers. But more and more computers are using GPUs, so if you want to use all other supercomputers, you may still need to use adapted software to run on them. Yes.
Yes. And so Cocos, is it so easy? It doesn't seem so easy to use, right? I mean, I would like to have something that I give to somebody my code and just put some Cocos or some instruction all around, and I don't have to work. Is it okay? Is it?
It has to be C++ code. It doesn't work like a Pragma approach for OpenMP or OpenACC. So you don't. It's not enough to just have a loop and put some pragmas over it. You need some minimal refactoring of the code in order to write some kernels, so computational bodies as functors. But that may be fast if it is already OpenMP hybrid parallelism using OpenMP, and if it has also vectorization. You may find similar examples in Cocos.
And so that's the strategy that was chosen, right? So using Cocos, but is there any other strategy possible?
Concurrence?
Yes, competing.
Yes, there is. There is Raja, that is also American software. Cycle can be thought as a concurrent of Cocos.
Which one?
Cycle.
Okay.
So I have in mind for now.
All right.
So yes, but their implementation may be different, but they introduce really similar ideas. So the concepts that I've shown here have their equivalent in all of these frameworks. So where do you want to run? Where do you want to store your data? How to execute the computational body, and the choices that are made either at compile time or at runtime. So technically they are different, but if you know one of them, you can surely use another one.
All right. So we need to learn about that, right? Okay. So thank you very much. And then I will ask the advisors to take the speech.
Okay, thank you. Well, I don't have many questions to ask Thomas because I've asked so many already during all these years. So I would like just to say a few words. That, well, I had the chance to work with Thomas for about the past 3 years, and it was really a great experience. And there's something I would like to say, that the manuscript and maybe also the presentation is just not scratching the surface of what Thomas has achieved, but there is a lot of hidden work that was not put down in the manuscript, nor that has been presented. Just there was an important work related to AMR, and let's say it was more engineering oriented or scientific computing oriented, but it was something that was remarkable. And there was question about the time strategy, and the fact that you indeed have implemented the implicit scheme, so it did not work as well as we would have liked to be. But the strategy was to choose another approach, and so it's not the story is not over with its implicit schemes, and well, you just had to focus on something else. So it's not just considered it like it was really also something important. And there are a few things that I can say about Thomas, that he was well, it was really a great experience. Thomas is curious, he's a fast learner. He had to absorb a lot of literature, reference, and scientific material about a lot of different and complicated matters like two-phase flow, fast change. There was also some work you achieved with integrating equation of states with using using a realistic equation of state that was not mentioned, but it was not used for the grand challenge, but it was also a great work. Scientific material about higher order methods, and well, I will stop here. I think Thomas is a very talented scientific computing engineer. He's also a really talented programmer. He's methodical, tenacious, and well, it was really great. And that's all I can say.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I don't have also not many questions since we exchanged a lot of questions about the past 3 years. We just stress again what the members of the jury have said, that you were really impressive in terms of your ability to tackle the applied mathematical part of what we have done, the physics also, on the computing. I mean, it has impressed today the jury. I think it has impressed your supervisor for the past 3 years, and it will still impress us for a long time. So it was really amazing what you managed to master, actually. And I think somehow take the best of the three of us, from Samuel, I, and Pierre for the high performance computing. And you did a really amazing work by combining them three. And all this part, you actually, I think I didn't really supervise you past the first year. After that, we really worked as collaborators, and you were mainly my teacher for C++ programming, and also to some extent in applied math. You are a lot more skilled than I am on this part. So it was really a great pleasure to work with you on that, as a student, I would say. And then also on the physics, we discussed a lot about physics, and I mean, your work has been the basis for to change a lot of important things in my projects about convection. So we did also based on this numerical simulation theoretical work that is really a game changer in the field, and also on other topics related to the two-phase flow application. Exchanging with you on the physics and all that has been really marvelous for the past 3 years. So I really thank you for all that. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Well, first of all, I congratulate you, Thomas, for this very nice and I think very clear presentation. So even if so it's Pascal, and with the help of so who supervised you for your PhD, but it was a pleasure to discuss with you during these 3 years, and to have you in the lab. I think, as was mentioned, you developed very strong skill in both physics, HPC, and applied math. So it's quite impressive, and I'm so very happy because it was the goal of the lab to be at the junction of these 3 subjects. So I think it's very pleasant to have a PhD which integrates so well all these aspects. I also would like to mention that you are very active in the lab. You were a representative for all the non-permanent members of the lab, and you did many things, teaching and being a rapporteur for a report at the Académie des Sciences. So I think you had a large impact in many things beside your PhD, which I think should also be noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now, is there any question from the doctors in the
room?
No chat question? No. So thank you very much. I think that we will talk now, and we will come back to later.